Hi, my name is Jess, and today I'm going to show you how to build an adaptable, reliable AI agent using Riza. Riza offers a code interpreter, which is a key unlock for everything from making chart generation much more flexible to making extracting data from a website much more reliable. And we're going to see both of these examples in this AI agent that we just built. Now, we just released a new guide that shows you how to build an AI agent that does data analysis, and we also use LangGraph and Browserbase together with Riza. In this video, I'm going to walk through the high-level overview, and then hopefully you're going to be excited to check out the full guide. So let's dive into what this is all about. So we have this agent actually goes and analyzes changes in fuel prices across different US states. And the way we do this is we scrape data from the AAA site here that you see, and the output is both a text summary of the notable data changes and also a chart that is appropriate that goes along with this analysis. So we don't know actually in advance what kind of chart we really should generate. We need to know what the analysis is before we generate that graph. So this is where Riza is really powerful when paired with an LLM. Let's take a look at the implementation. So here is the flow of what happens in this AI agent. So this whole step-by-step flow is orchestrated using LangGraph. And the first step is that we scrape data from that AAA site. Now we use Browserbase here. It's actually really important. If you try to just scrape this data using, let's say, the Python requests library, you will get blocked. And then the next step, we extract the data from that HTML that we've just scraped and convert it to a much easier to manage CSV. Here we actually use Riza, and we don't have to even write all of the scraping code ourselves. So we're gonna dig into that later into this video. Now, the next step, we check if the data has changed. Only if it has changed, we will analyze the notable changes. So that's a call to your LLM of choice. And then we generate a relevant chart. And that is where Riza comes in again to generate the appropriate graph for the analysis that the LLM just did. All right, now let's look at what are the key challenges, right? So number one is, what if the website design changes, right? That is actually a key part that could break in this data workflow. And that could mean anything from AAA deciding that they want to change the headers on their table, or it could mean that they've slightly reordered some of the columns or something like that, or changed the design of that HTML table. All of these changes might be things that actually you don't necessarily need to adapt to yourself if you're using Riza and generating code for an LLM to run. You could bypass that and make your workflow much more reliable. So you're going to see that in this guide. The next challenge is, how do we generate a relevant chart if we don't know what the analysis will be each time we go through this workflow? And again, Riza is the important aspect here, and we'll see more later. Now, if you want to just jump to the full guide, you can do that. It's linked in our docs. Go to the LangGraph guide. You can also search gas price, and that'll come up. I will do a deep dive into just one. Let's look at the first step here, which is that data extraction step, where we pull the data out of the HTML and turn it into a CSV. And that's really going to show the foundational concept here that we are doing. All right, now let's dive into the code. Let's start with the overview, which is the graph of all of the step-by-step nodes in our workflow. As you can see, this is all of the code that defines that workflow we saw, which starts with scraping the prices from the AAA site. Then we move on to extracting the price data. Later on, you can see that we have this logic where only if there's a change in the data do we move on to using the LLM to summarize the change and then create the chart. Otherwise, we go directly to the end. This entire graph was really easy to build and declare using LangGraph. And LangGraph provides the great abstractions that make this super easy and readable. Now we want to dive into this step, extract price data. So this is the step that runs after we have scraped prices, which we do again with Browserbase. And now we have the HTML, and we want to get the HTML into a CSV format, right? From an HTML table to CSV. So for that is we do it with Riza and an LLM. So let's take a look at this node called extract price data. Now in this step, we have basically two things going on. The first thing is this is an LLM call. I will deep dive into this 1 second, but we basically call the LLM and provide the HTML that we have just scraped. So this is the gas price HTML. Then we generate, so we ask the LLM to generate code to extract the data and turn it into a CSV. Now, after we have that code, the Python code, we throw it at Riza and run it, right? And we also provide it that same HTML that we want to extract from. We want to give the code and the thing we want to get to extract from. And that's it. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch. And this pattern of asking an LLM to write code, to write a function, and then running that function on a code interpreter like Riza, that is a reusable, very powerful pattern that you should think about using whenever you need flexibility and adaptability in your agents. So now let's take a closer look at what this extractor does. So we can see that it's a call to Anthropic's Claude Sonnet model, and you really could use another model here. This is just what I picked, but like take your favorite OpenAI or other LLM provider, and you can stick it in here. The prompt here is a little bit more important. So note that I am telling it, hey, please write me a Python function, right? It extracts the data, returns it as a CSV with the following headings. I don't want anything except the code. Don't give me any explanation about it. And that's so I can just directly run the code, right? Without having to clean it up. There's a couple more sort of directions here that make this function something that Riza in particular can understand. If you look at the Riza execute function API, you'll understand why we have these sort of things about passing things as like a data object that has a field. And note that we actually provide the LLM with the ability to run code with Beautiful Soup 4, right? That actually is something we configure in our Riza setup. So if I scroll up a little bit more, you're going to see something we define here, which is a runtime ID. So there's something in Riza called a custom runtime. And to simplify things, basically is a really simple way to set up the ability to use any third-party library you want. If you haven't heard of Beautiful Soup, it's a very popular HTML parsing library. And for this step, we would like the LLM to be able to write code that uses Beautiful Soup. So that means in our runtime, in our custom code interpreter runtime, we want Beautiful Soup to be installed. And so we've done the setup. You could see all the details in the guide that basically make Beautiful Soup available. So, so that's the prompt. And then when we run the code that comes out of that prompt, all we do is call the Riza SDK here. So this Riza client is coming from here, which is, our Riza IO SDK. And we pass in that runtime ID. We pass in the HTML that we want to extract from and the Python code we want to run. So that basically gets the data out, and we want the output. It is really that simple. You can see I've put some print statements here so that when you run this code yourself, you can easily see what's going on, including what code got generated, then what the output looks like when you get it out of Riza. Awesome. So next step, I'm going to just run this agent one time and you can see the actual output. All right, so I just ran the agent one time and let's look at the output. So first of all, you can see I ran uv run main.py. Main.py is just invoking the LangGraph graph we built and providing the URL of the gas price site we're using, which is that AAA site. I also provide the path to a directory where I want to save the output, and that is that directory right here. So maybe just to skip to the end, let me show you the chart that was generated. So it generated this PNG of gas price changes by state, and it just chose to do regular gas. Okay, so how did we get there? By the way, these are previous runs that I did earlier, and I saved them. So I manually changed the title. That's so you understand what's going on there. But this is the one that actually was created by this run. So you can see the first thing that's printed out is the output of that step where we use Browserbase to scrape the data from AAA. And if I want, I can go to this URL and rewatch that session of the Browserbase like opening that site and getting the data. The next thing is the actual Python code that we generated in the step we just looked at, which is extracting the data from the CSV data from the HTML table. So this is the code that Claude gave us to create that CSV. And it's great. It's using Beautiful Soup because we told it could use Beautiful Soup in the code. And so we actually run it against, I print out the HTML table that we extracted, just so you know what we're running this code against. And then finally, what's the output after we actually run the code? So we get this object back, which has one field called CSV, and that's our CSV data. So this is working like we expect it to. I also just saved that CSV to this file here so that you can look at it and have a clearer view of it. All right, so I'll briefly go over the next piece of code we see here. This is the step we didn't look at. We didn't look at the chart generation step. It works pretty much the same way as the data extraction step in terms of the structure of it. So we prompt an LLM to write the code, to write the Python function that will generate the graph. And it's using Plotly because we told it can use Plotly. That's because we provided that library in Riza. And then this code we then run on Riza. And yeah, I didn't print the output here, but I did print the final output from this agent, which is the text summary, right? This is the analysis that it did. And then it tells us that we can, I think that the overview is very focused on price decreases and increases for regular gas. So that really matches the chart that was generated along with it. So yeah, the final thing I will note that, we mentioned that like the flexibility, right? The chart being really flexible is one of the benefits of using the Riza plus LLM approach here. So As an example, here is the chart that was generated for earlier in this month. And this one had no comparison data, right? This is the very first run. And so there was nothing there's no analysis that we could do for like, here's how the price changed. And so this chart is therefore much more focused on just absolute values and doing kind of like it uses different colors to show what's like a small versus a large price, right? And that's an example of how you can get really flexible graphs by using this approach. We don't hard code anything about what the charts need to look like, and yet there's a lot of variety. All right, I hope you're now excited to check out the guide and run the agent yourself. Feel free to leave any comments or questions in the comment section below, or find us on Discord, join our Discord and ask any questions there. Again, this is how you find the guide. Go to our doc site and search for LangGraph or gas price, and you're gonna find it. See you next time.